Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Brass Junkies. I am your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you doing this fine Saturday afternoon?
I feel wonderful.
What?
I have radio voice today. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And it is my pleasure to be speaking with you, Andrew.
Well, for episode 45 of the Brass Junkies, our guest today is trumpet player and arranger extraordinaire Phil Snedecor. Just last night, I was thinking about. I've been playing a ton of F tuba lately. I know, fascinating. I've been playing a lot of F tuba lately, and I've been. You what?
What key is that in?
What key? Well, it depends. It's usually in F. So, but sometimes I play it out of tune enough that it sounds like it's in F sharp down in the low register. Or it's kind of somewhere between F and F sharp actually. But anyway, I realized that I really needed to get back to my home base of C tuba, and I was thinking just last night I was playing Phil's Low Etudes for Tuba book. And it might be my favorite tuba etude book, actually. It's certainly on the shortest list possible, and nothing centers me like playing his Low Etudes for Tuba book on C tuba. It's very difficult, it's very challenging. At least I find it so, and it's awesome. So it was, in fact, I knew him from that book before he and I were colleagues at George Mason, and before I got to play with him, and before I got to play his music. So I knew him as a composer, and then I was like, oh, it turns out this guy is one of the best trumpet players in the world. So yeah, who knew? But we had a pretty cool conversation with him.
That was fun, and I got to relive the first time. Actually, I don't know if I've played with him other than this one time, which coincided with the day that I separated from the United States Air Force. So the day I became a veteran, I was a very happy boy that day, and we had an afternoon gig, and Phil was on that. And I remember the look on his face as he was extremely confused as to why I had this incredible grin on my face the entire time. He just seemed to scratch his head and wonder what was up with this guy.
I think the two happiest days. You what?
I'm not sure he got an answer, but I could see him wondering.
The two happiest days of Lance's life, I believe, were the birth of his daughter and then the birth of his son. And the third happiest day was the first day that he ever played a gig with Phil Snedecor.
That's right.
Yeah. So you thought I was going to say your ex-wife. That's what you thought because you smiled. But no, I didn't go there. So
no, I actually knew where you were going, but that would have been a good one, too.
So, anyway, we tell the people about Patreon because we've got a number of people who are helping us there, and they are awesome.
All right, people, here's the deal.
Listen up, people.
Listen up, people. Sit down. You.
Shh.
Okay, so there is a way that you can financially help us offset the costs of producing these podcasts, and that there's a couple of ways, but the way I'm about to talk about is via Patreon, Patreon.com. And if you search The Brass Junkies, you can see that we offer podcasts, which you probably know because you're listening to one. And what you can do is you can contribute an amount that can be as little as $1 per episode. And that will be charged to your bank account or credit card, whatever you stick up there, only after each incidence of the podcast being published. Actually, it gives you an opportunity to hear the podcast about 12 hours early, usually. But it helps us offset the cost of producing and editing and uploading and hosting these podcasts, and we really appreciate the help of our fantastic patrons. The other thing I want to let you know is starting this fall, we're going to be offering Patreon-only content. Podcasts will always be free. They will continue to be free for as long as we're doing them. But if you want a little more insight into what's going on behind the scenes, what guests we have planned, what sort of recording setup we have, what is just sort of on our minds, The best way to find out about that stuff and be on the inside behind the scenes is to join us at patreon.com. So for those of you who have already done so and continue to, thank you very much. You are in a very real, tangible way helping us pay for this podcast. And for those of you who are considering it, please consider it more. Like harder, like really concentrate hard.
Consider it harder.
Think method. Think harder about. Consider it with like a capital K. Consider, like that's how much you consider it. And if you just want to listen, thank you for doing that as well. So that's Patreon.
Very cool. We would also like to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing our hosting. Parker Mouthpieces offers fine, customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model euphonium mouthpiece. Find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So now that we've got the announcements out of the way, without further ado, we will cut to one of Hartford, Connecticut's newest residents, trumpet virtuoso Phil Snedecor. And today we are joined by trumpet player, composer, arranger, husband, human, Phil Snedecor. How are you doing today, Phil?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Where in the world are you?
I'm in Albany, New York, playing with the Albany Symphony right now. I just got done with a week of teaching at my new gig at the Hart School, and I shot up here to do some stuff with Eric Berlin. We're doing some Sibelius and some Ravel.
Very cool. So you've got a ton of irons in the fire. I mean, you just have so much stuff going on, and you play more freelance. Like really great, like top of the line freelance gigs than anybody I've ever met. It's crazy. You're always playing something somewhere, and it's always a good gig. So can you tell us a little bit about like what that existence is like and why you've had, other than just being a phenomenal player, why you've had so much success doing that for so long?
Well, I think it's only a good gig if you make it into a good gig. I've been called for plenty of gigs that some people will consider are not great gigs, but you show up and you have a good attitude and you play your best and you make it into a good gig, and then they call you back for the next things. This may be a little better gig.
Right.
I think that's one of the secrets. That's what I tell everybody, is that it doesn't matter how great the gig is you get called for. Show up, play great, walk away, get called again. And then it always snowballs from there. And always try to contribute, try to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. I'm doing these seminars at Hart now where I'm telling the kids, here's what you need to do to be successful in the post the post heyday of the orchestral world.
Right.
And what you really have to do is be part of the solution, which is the problem is there's not enough work and there's too many players.
Right.
Part of the solution would be to make rain. And that's what I do. I make rain. If there's not enough playing jobs out there, I go to try to make one. The part of the problem would be sitting by the phone and lamenting that nobody calls you.
Right.
And there's too many people like that out there. So go start a group. Go play on the street corner. Go do whatever you have to do to try to make some rain, and it's gonna happen for you.
The only problem.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say the only problem with that is that it's a lot easier to complain to your friend on the phone over social media, whatever, about the phone not ringing than it is to go and create your own thing, which I think is probably why no one ever, well, sometimes, but rarely do you get criticized for putting other things down. It's easy. But if you create something, you put something out there, like Washington Symphonic Brass that we're going to get to, and we'll talk about that plenty, but then someone can say, yeah, I don't really like Phil's group, and then you're kind of putting yourself out there. It's a lot easier to just, it's a lot easier to put down Phil's group than it is to make it, right? So, yeah, which is a problem.
Well, you have to have a work ethic. And if you're a freelancer, your full-time job is freelancing. So get your butt out of bed, work 8 hours doing something, either practicing or arranging or making a gig or making some phone calls or making some contacts or going and playing on the street. I don't care what it is. Work 8 hours and then you can have beer.
Right.
It's very simple.
which is not to indicate that it's very easy, but it's a very simple and direct approach, and obviously is one that I believe in, Andrew believes in, you believe in. Did you always feel this way? Is this a thing you grew into, or did you always kind of have this drive and I'm just going to pick up the ball and run with it?
I got that from my dad. He said, it doesn't matter what you do, get up and put in your 8-hour day or more, and then you can, kick back if you want, but don't let the fact that you don't have a full-time job right now be an excuse for not putting in your full-time hours. And I always got that from him, because he was a very successful businessman, but he went through periods of his life where he didn't have a job, and he totally did that. He got up at the crack of dawn and did his exercises and did his work, and whether he had a job or not, he would be in his office working for at least 8 hours. And that's what I do. And it's not, if you do that, if you have that work ethic, it's actually not that hard to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
What's hard is to sit there and practice a couple of 3 hours a day and then complain that nobody's calling you. And
Right.
there's a lot of people that do that.
Right.
So, you can find something to do for 8 hours a day. It doesn't have to be 9 to 5, but, slap together 8 hours and do it. And things will start happening for you. I guarantee it.
So how do you handle frustration if you're a student and you feel like you're plugging away and you're plugging away? How do you stick to it? How do you know you're going in the right direction? I guess would be another way to look at it.
First of all, you have to believe in your product. I say we're a service-oriented business, so we have a product. Our product is playing our tuba or playing our euphonium or playing our trumpet. And if you don't believe in that product and that somebody's going to eventually buy it, then you should go do something else. But the funny thing is that the reality actually doesn't have to match your perception. You could be kind of a mediocre player and really believe in yourself, really believe in some quality of yourself, and you'll be successful. Or you could be a great player and think you kind of suck and be not successful. Mm-hmm. You have to believe in yourself. So what kept me going the whole time is not that I was the greatest trumpet player in the world, but that I had something to say, and I found ways to say it. So I started doing other things than playing trumpet. I was successful in the trumpet world, but I also started writing and putting together groups. And one thing I never thought I'd like a whole lot is contracting, because I saw Dave Flowers and people like that doing it and saw them running around like crazy. And I thought, I never want to do that. But I take great pride in putting together orchestras now that actually work together and sound good, and it's a lot of fun, even though it's a lot of work.
So how did you know how to do that? I mean, because I hear from students, well, I don't know how to make a website. I don't know how to call somebody. I don't know how to. So what do you tell that student?
I'm sorry, that's crap. What do you mean you don't know how to do that? Just figure it out. I mean, I didn't know how to do Final Cut Pro or Pro Tools or Logic Pro or any of that stuff, but I do all that now because I went and figured it out, because I needed to do it. I wanted to do it. The desire was there, and I just went and figured it out.
Amen.
Ask
someone. Yeah, there's...
Ask Andrew Hitz.
Oh,
he knows.
I know how to do all that stuff you just said, the Final Cut Pro thing and all that. Yeah, absolutely.
That's not the knife that you bought online, by the way. That's not that Ginsu knife. No.
Hey, man, that's a great knife. Yeah, well, and speaking of online, I mean, yes, it's always great to ask somebody, but if you don't know anybody that has the answer, there's this thing called the internet. And now as soon as you get to, everyone, it's not like you actually need to be explained how to use Google, but if you can get really good at using a search engine, there are 5,000 videos on YouTube of how to play high notes on the trumpet, which are complete and utter crap. But there's a handful of them that are really great, and editing and there are videos on how people start arranging. I mean, there's videos on literally anything that you could ever imagine, and it's all data, right? You don't watch the first video and then say, okay, I guess this is how it goes. You might stumble on a Phil Snedecor for arranging, who you're one of the best in the world, in my opinion, and you can send the $20. I'll give you my address afterwards. But
it's already...
Yeah, there you go. I'm cheap, obviously. Yeah, I'll say nice things about you for only $20. The audience is like, wow, that's disappointing. No, in all seriousness, you're phenomenal at arranging. But then there's also going to be, if I did a video, I don't arrange, so that would be interesting, But we could both have them up there. So if you do your research and then you just start doing it, and you sift through it all, then anybody can teach themselves anything. I love that 8 hours a day. That's a really great concept.
Yeah, because it's really not a whole... I mean, there's 24 hours in the day. So that's just a little chunk out of your day.
Sure.
There's still plenty of room for screwing around with your friends and, whatever else you want to do. Just put in your 8 hours. And of course, I put in a lot more than that, but I think that's a good start for somebody that's fresh out of college, that doesn't know what to do with themselves, that hasn't won the New York Philharmonic yet, and they're waiting for, that person in that position to get sick or die or whatever. And so you have to do something with your day. Put in 8 hours. And you'll figure out what to do. And if the desire is there, and you mentioned about being good at something, I think you'll figure out what you're good at. You can figure out, hey, I have a knack for this. I don't have a knack for this. There's a lot of things that I can't do, that I don't even try to do. But I started arranging because I thought I had a good sense of what might sound good together. And I started listening to charts thinking, well, I could do better than this, frankly. And then I started out by fixing other people's charts. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to do my own.
Right.
So,
if you were starting out today, how would you attack it? You just graduated, and I know obviously you're going to work 8 hours a day. What would you be spending that time doing?
I would write down all the things I wanted to do for a living and figure out how I was going to get paid for it. So, first of all, let's say, okay, you love playing the tuba, or you love playing the trombone, or you love playing your instrument. So that's number one. So we all kind of know, okay, we have to practice, but practicing is not necessarily going to get us paid. So how can we make the contacts in the community we're in to get paid? So I say community because if let's say you're a touring musician, or you have a touring group and you go to Omaha every year, that's part of your community. You have to, somehow you have to get another gig in Omaha next year or next month or whatever. It doesn't matter if it's your town or your community at large, but you have to continue to make contacts in these communities. So it's not good enough to just sit there and get better at your instrument. That's number one. That's part of my 8 hours. I'm going to get better at my instrument. I'm never going to stop getting better at my instrument. Number two is, how can I go out there and somehow make some progress today on performing on my instrument for money? Okay, and then if your other goal is to arrange or to contract or to teach or to do any of these above, let's say you want to start a studio, go out there and make those contacts. Get your butt out the door. Go meet these people. If you have to, go cold call. But what I like to do is try to figure out some way that a friend of a friend of a friend knows somebody that can help me.
Yes.
And that's all about keeping your contacts current. And that's for another thing I learned from my dad, is that you have a network of people around you that are going to be able to help you in some way if you just figure that out.
And nowadays with Facebook, you can enter someone's name into the search field, and then you can see that you've got 18 mutual friends, and if one of the mutual friends is somebody that you're close with, and then you can text your friend, call that friend, and say, hey, how do you know so and so? And then they might say, oh, we did TMC together 20 years ago, like we're really good friends. And it's like, hey, can you make an introduction? And then suddenly, one of their good friends is making an introduction to, it's like good friends. You're off on the right foot there. And it's like, it's never been easier to network if you just do it intentionally.
I'll tell you two quick stories. One is when I first published my lyrical etudes for trumpet book, and I had this manuscript that I was kind of showing around to people, and they were like, yeah, they're pretty good, but publishing's really hard, and I just happened to send it to Vinny DiMartino, who I had studied with in the summers at Eastman. And he called me up immediately and said, these are great. I know Dennis Avey, who is the head of Robert King Music, and you should send this to him, and I'm going to tell him to publish it. And so right away, I had that in because I had studied with Vinny, and he thought these were good, and he believed in the product. And then the rest of the books kind of followed from there. Low etudes for tuba, I know you guys are interested in asking me about that. That started on just an offhanded comment from John Cradler of the Marine Band that, gee, nobody writes down in the Prokofiev 5 range, the 5 ledger line C range. We're always taking, Conconi's down an octave. And I think that's really stupid. And I was like, that is really stupid. I was like, well, I could do that. I'll just do this, and I'll just write some of these charts kind of like I did with the trumpet thing, way down there and see what happens. And it's taken off beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, you guys use that for everything. I really do want to do a volume 2. I just finished volume 2 of the trumpet thing, but I want to do a volume 2 of the tuba thing. I mean,
Please
you guys have really taken ownership over that. And I just kind of stumbled upon that market by accident. Brian, this tuba player named Brian that I know in Philadelphia got really mad at me when he met me because he realized I wasn't a tuba player, and he said, I've been sitting out in the middle of on this rock every day trying to play the Snedecor number 5, thinking there's a guy named Phil that can play this, and if he can play it, I can play it. And now you're telling me you play a trumpet? He was not happy. I thought he was going to beat me up.
It's been awesome if you could have picked up a tuba and like knocked it out, though.
Yeah.
Like,
but Brian's a good guy. He's passionate about what he does, so he didn't beat me up in the end. He was nice.
That's good. That's not as good a story, but that's good.
My last story actually is recently. One of my Facebook friends, this guy named Alan King, who's in Maine, he'd been kind of following me for years and years. And then when I got this Hart gig, I kind of contacted him. He's up in Maine. I said, hey, Alan, do you think I could, come up there and play for your students? And this guy who I've never met is setting up this whole clinic thing for me to go up there for a day and play for these high school students. I need to be recruiting for Hart. And so contacts like that have been really valuable for me. He's been kind of following what I've been doing. I haven't really cultivated this relationship other than saying, hi, how you doing? He's commented on my page. And so you have a point about Facebook. Try to figure out who in your community of Facebook or other social media you might be able to make contact with, where you not only can get help from them, but they can help you. I mean, you can help them, they can help you. It's all a community, and it's a much bigger community than it used to be.
I met a band director in California by the name of David Ahrens, who I'm now good friends with, as with his wife Susie, who's a tuba player. But Lance and I met him when we were out at, I think it was Wibbick or ABC. He's taken his band to Wibbick and was a student at ABC. Anyway, we met and we talked for 5 minutes in the lobby. But then he and I got to know each other over Twitter. And kind of I saw what he was sharing, and we communicated through that medium. Anyway, fast forward, and this was like 5 years ago, that I decided I wanted to go out to California. I felt like doing a week out there, and so I approached him and said, "Hey, would you be interested in having me come solo with your band and do a clinic, etc.?" And he said, "Absolutely, that would be great." And it fell into place right away. And then, without even asking him, he said, "And would you like me to help you to find some other schools to hit while you're out here?" And he then found 2 other schools. So I did 3 residencies. And then actually the 4th one was, I told Lance about this, and Lance said, I have a former student who was out there in Northern California that he got me in touch with. And so, it was like it all just came together just from, I also knew, obviously, that he had a program that would bring someone in because of what he was sharing, et cetera. But the world is such a small place that you just never know, what connection. And I certainly wasn't talking to him in the lobby after that Boston Brass show going, I'm going to be nice to this guy because I might be able to monetize this relationship someday. I mean, we were just, shooting the, and it ended up that happened a number of years later. But that stuff happens all the time now in the music world. And I'm sure that's how you've gotten a lot of your first calls, right, for freelance stuff.
Absolutely. Only a small percentage of what I have is due to these blind auditions. I mean, I have won blind auditions, but a lot of what I've gotten has been, somebody calls you for some small gig. You go to do a good job. They start trusting you. Our business, what people don't understand is our business is very much based on trust. If I hire somebody, I'm going to trust that they're going to come do a good job for me, because in the end, if they come crap all over themselves, it's on me.
Right.
So you've kind of laid all of the things out. I'm going to steer you in a direction on purpose, because I hear from students all the time, okay, when I graduate, I'm going to move to a town where I may or may not know anybody. How do I break into that scene? And you've laid the groundwork there, but would you sort of specifically put the dots right next to each other? I mean, you've moved up to Connecticut now. So you're in that boat in a different, it's different as a 24-year-old just out of college and what you're doing. But I think really the activities are probably the same or very, very similar. So what would you do? You just graduated and you've moved to wherever. How do you break in?
Right. I've done that 3 different times in my life. When I first graduated, I moved to Dallas. I had a short stint with Dallas Brass, but I also freelanced around there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I played with Gary Carper and Alex Houchin and Whiff Rudd in 1986 at the Dallas Brass.
Oh.
For 8 months, yeah.
See,
so then I moved
this show is educational.
Who
knew? Who knew?
That's actually where I learned how to put together a touring group. I learned a lot from Mike Levine, what he was doing, how he was putting that group together. I picked his brain every time I could.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw how it all worked. I was like, oh, this is great. I hadn't learned any of this crap in college. And so that was a little real world experience.
I joined Dallas Brass for a year in 1999. See, I bet
there
you
you
did.
go. We missed each other.
Yeah, we did. Just barely. Just 13
by like
years.
17 years.
It's close.
Close.
When you go back to breaking into a new city.
Okay,
Stop
so
distracting him, Lance.
Then I went to Chicago for the specific purpose of studying with Arnold Jacobs. I did that for 4 years, and I also played in Civic, and I played Northwest Indiana and Elgin and all this stuff. I'll just give you a brief overview, and then I moved to D.C. area. So all three of these places, Dallas, Chicago, D.C., I had to kind of start over. And the good news is in all three of those places, I had some connections somewhere. I just had to figure out what I had. So now let's say you're, for some reason, either it's a spouse or a family member, you have to move to a specific town, or you decide this is a good town to move to. You sit down with all the people you've ever known or come across in your life, and you figure out who's got connections in this town. And you call them and you say, hey, Aunt Susie that lives in Peoria? Well, I'm moving to Peoria. Can I call Aunt Susie and see who she might know? I mean, that's kind of an extreme example. Hopefully, somebody in the music industry. But if you don't, grab a hold of any straw that you can get a hold of, make that contact, and see what it turns into. And so you need to do that before you show up in said town. That's important. Don't just show up and go, oh, I'm not able to make rent this month. Figure out how you can put together something for when you get there, it's at least in motion. So I did that for everything, all three of those. Of course, the Connecticut move is completely different because, I'm full-time associate professor here. So I'm not worried about, getting freelance gigs in Hartford because I'm still keeping my principal trumpet position in Harrisburg Symphony, and I go down and do Washington Symphony Brass stuff, and I'm doing solo things. It doesn't matter whether I work on the trumpet in Hartford right now. It doesn't, if that happens, great. If not,
That's great. That's a great, students think there's some sort of magic, and it's what you said. It's the 8-hour-a-day thing. And I'm just really glad that you sort of spelled that out there. So let me follow up then. Andrew and I spend a lot of time talking to students and anyone who will listen about the notion that musicians, most/all, are going to have some version of a portfolio career where you have a variety of income sources that make up what your income is. How has that portfolio shifted over time? Like, what percentage of time now you have this full-time teaching gig, so does that mean you're spending less time writing or performing, or at other times in your life, I know you've been conducting quite a bit, and then how have the percentages shifted over the course of your career?
Well, just in the last month, I've shifted to a lot more teaching, obviously, because I have these guys that are my responsibility, which is really exciting, actually. So a lot more of my time is teaching. Before, I was adjunct at Peabody and George Mason, and I would do what I call drive-by teachings, which I drive in and go, okay, who are you, what's your name, and what did we do last week? and now I can really look over these guys, and they're all great people, and we're gonna make a hell of a studio out of it. It's really exciting, actually. But I'm still, let's see. My first week, I taught for 3.5 days, and then I went to New York and I did a series of Mozart requiems for 9/11. I did 4 straight 9/11 and that was cool. And then what did I do last week? I can't even remember. But I went and played somewhere last week, and this week I'm playing Albany Symphony, and next week I'm playing Harrisburg Symphony, and then I'm going to go to D.C. and do something. And so I'm always flying off and doing something, but the basics for what I'm doing is teaching. Right now, as far as arranging is concerned, I'm arranging a piece for the Hart Gala for shells, djembes, brass, and singer. And we're going to do this really cool version of the Hart Alma Mater for those unusual bedfellows, and I'm going to make something creative out of it. And hopefully, one of the things I want to do is make the brass more of a part of the university as a whole. So the other day we showed up for the library construction topping off ceremony where they put this big steel beam in place to start the whole construction. And we went out there and did a fanfare, and they loved it. They loved the fact that we showed up. Half of life is showing up. Show up with your little band of thieves and do something for somebody that's not in the music department. They will really appreciate it.
Well, and who, see, this is where, man, I start getting on a soapbox. So,
oh, goody.
So, Phil, here's a leading question. Who gave you permission to go do that?
Yeah.
Nobody, right?
What?
Nobody.
So, what?
I pulled that right out of my rear end, and I'm happy I did, because nobody's going to tell you to do that. And that's where musicians need to take charge of. First of all, as musicians, we're used to kind of solving our own problems. Hopefully, they say go learn these 7 etudes, and we'll see you next week. And so then you have to figure out, okay, how do I learn all these notes in 7 weeks, or how do I fix this problem? So you're used to fixing your own problems. So what I tell people is, if you don't make it in music, you're going to make a hell of a computer programmer, because you're going to be able to solve these problems. You'll have these skills as a music student that are marketable. Don't think that you can only play your axe. You've got other skills. You just have to realize you do. And one of the things that I have is the ability to branch off into something else other than solving trumpet problems, to think outside of the box and to go do something like that. So that's a good question. Nobody's going to give you permission or go tell you to do any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. You just saw the opportunity. You knew that this thing was going down, and you thought, oh, you know what? There's a whole bunch of dollars going into this building. And if we go show up, then they're going to remember us maybe next time.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That's so proactive. You know, hearing you answer the question about what you would do if you moved to a town, and even if you need to, turning over the stone that is your aunt, whatever you've said, Aunt Abby, like in terms of finding a connection, or playing at this, this ceremony that you just kind of created. It's I'm guessing that there's at least somebody who hears you say spend 8 hours a day and kind of was thinking to themselves, like, how the hell am I going to fill 8 hours of stuff? But when you get into this kind of detail and being this proactive, it's at some point it is you got to figure out like what you're going to spend your 8 hours on, because you got
limited to 8 hours.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that you have some.
My problem is never how do I spend my 8 hours. It's how do I keep the getting from 8 hours to 16 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I could use a few more hours in the day.
Sure. When you were talking about the 8 hours thing, I was reminded of Gary Vaynerchuk, who is one of my favorite authors and speakers. He's a complete nut job, but he's brilliant, and he talks about hustle a lot, and he talks about even if you have a full-time job doing something that has absolutely nothing to do with playing the trumpet, if that's what you want to do, or teaching it, or writing, or whatever, that's just paying the mortgage. He talks about how if you don't binge watch House of Cards ever, and you don't spend your time all day on social media, not in a networking positive way, just in a kind of a brain sap kind of a way, that if you just tell all of that stuff to go away, that you can spend from I think the numbers he uses is from 7 p.m. until 2 a.m. every single day, and right there, that's 7 hours. So, and guess what? It's easy to just tell somebody to do that after they just worked 9 to 5 and then ate dinner. But the thing is that if you're not doing that, then there's a man or a woman somewhere in the world who wants to do the exact same things that you do, who also has to be working a full-time job, who is going to do that. And my money's going to be on him or her over you, 999 out of 1,000 times. It's just so important to work hard and to be as proactive as you're describing. It's the key to everything.
Well, what you got to realize is when you're first putting all this together, you actually own a business. You have your brand. You're branding yourself in college. When you show up and do a great job, that's making the brand better. When you show up and are not prepared and are an idiot, that's hurting the brand.
Yep.
Okay. So you got to decide: are you going to be a Chipotle, or are you going to be something else? So and what happened to Chipotle wasn't necessarily the CEO's fault, but it hurt their brand. Don't try to keep your brand polished and the stock high by just showing up and doing things. And the kind of business you own, and I'll use something from Ray Ricker's book. Ray Ricker wrote a book called Advice from a Streetwise Professor. I highly recommend that book. It talks about doing these different things, and he does what he calls it Legos, putting different things in different places to build this career. And I've taken it one step further, and I call Legos, your business is a long-term employment generation organization. Okay, and you're putting these Legos together in different places, and pretty soon you're going to be making a full-time living. You're going to be able to pay the mortgage and your kids' tuition on not what the New York Philharmonic pays you, but what you're paying yourself out of this organization you just built. And that can just be freelance euphonium, or it can be 1,000 different things along with playing your instrument.
I like that. I'm writing that down.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll put a link to the book in the show notes.
It's on Amazon.
So can you talk to us about Washington Symphonic Brass? And for anyone who might not know what it is, can you tell us what it is and how it got started and how you're still involved?
Yeah, so Washington Symphonic Brass started in 1993 with Milton Stevens and myself. And when I first got into D.C., I was subbing with National Symphony, and he and I were backstage talking, and he said that he knew that I played in Millar Brass Ensemble in Chicago, which is another great brass ensemble, and there was nothing like that in the D.C. area. And I was surprised because there were all these great military musicians, and there were 2 orchestras close to each other, 2 major orchestras, and then there were like 5 other ones in the area. And I'm like, there's so many brass players. I mean, the D.C. area actually has more full-time employed brass players than just about any place in the country, maybe even the world, because of what I just mentioned.
Tuba, it has more than New York and L.A. combined. No joke. I mean, it's crazy.
These guys are all getting paid a living wage to play their tuba. I mean, there's no bigger tuba mecca in the country.
Right.
Euphonium, for that matter, too, right? Because
absolutely. On the planet, there's no place else on the planet with that many pros.
Okay, so I saw an opportunity there that we need an orchestral brass ensemble, because there were some brass bands around, some British style brass bands, and then also the bands had there were other like offshoots of military bands, but no orchestral brass ensemble. So Milt really wanted to conduct. I really wanted to start this and arrange and play, and so we did, and played our first concert in 1993 in a church for free, and played the Tomasi Fanfare Liturgique and my arrangement of the Bernstein on the Town. People came, and then we just started from there and kept playing, and pretty soon we started getting jobs and getting a concert series, and then starting our own concert series. And we, in really the heyday of it, we were playing 3 different venues, 3 different times a year. So 9 different concerts we were self-producing. That was just the self-produced ones. In the meantime, like last year in 2015, we were the official brass group for the Pope when he came, Pope Francis. In 2008, we were the official brass group for Pope Benedict. And so people, because of our concertizing activities and our recordings, people wanted the name Washington Symphonic Brass. They would call me and I would put together whatever they needed. The other advantage to hiring us is if you need 10 things arranged that used to be for, 5 kazoos and harp, and you wanted it put together for brass, I'm the guy.
Right.
So I can figure that out, and we can go and we can make whatever you want happen, because that's kind of what I do. And I think every group needs to have somebody like that. That's like, okay, again, you're the customer. You're in this case for the Pope, it was Tom Staley of St. Matthew's Cathedral, and he knew that I could just basically put together whatever he wanted. G-Phil, I've got this piece that's originally for 2 flutes, 2 clarinets, and choir and organ, and can we somehow make this brass? And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. Piccolo trumpets, horns, some brass for the organ part. It actually worked out really cool. I mean, I'm not just making that up. That was an actual piece.
Right.
And we played that on the Pope thing last fall, and it was very successful, along with a lot of other things that weren't originally for brass.
Maybe there's no simple answer to this question, but where do you see the greatest opportunities for musicians right now? Where, like, you guys ought to be heading in this direction, or there's a huge opportunity in this industry or this corner of the market, or what do you see?
I see very much a lot of big orchestras scrambling for a market that's dwindling. And the reason the market's dwindling is because the orchestras are not exactly thinking outside of the box in their programming and when you go to an orchestra concert these days, and not to get too much on my soapbox, but you don't exactly some of the orchestras aren't as inspired as they used to be. You don't hear a Bernie Edelstein or a Harry Glantz and Toscanini just going for broke these days. It's literally just giving their all for the music. It's always perfect notes, and it could be L.A. or Cleveland or Chicago or whatever. They're all great. They're all really great, but they're all perfect. And it's in a way, it's become a little boring in its perfection, frankly. I know I usually get a lot of grief for saying that, but I'll just say it. And I think the opportunity here for us as musicians is show up and give your audience something real. Give them something from your heart. And I think they want that. They need that. People in this day and age, they want to see somebody really expressing themselves in a very real way, whether it's perfect or not. And I think that's lacking these days. And the opportunity to slide in and to really do, I mean, that's one of the reasons Minozel's so great. I mean, not only are they technical greatness, but there's so much humanism in their show. It's funny. It's not only funny, but it touches something in all of us, and we have a good time doing it in a way that we don't when we go see a major orchestra play Bruckner 9. I mean, that's something on a completely different level, and I'm not going to knock that, but they're not. Those orchestras aren't doing that, and I think there's a room for us to do that as players and as entrepreneurs of our own groups.
Isn't it funny that Minozel that they're a number of them are acting as characters on stage, so they're not even acting quote unquote like themselves intentionally, and yet you, like 5 minutes into a Minozel show, you feel like you know them as humans, which is interesting because a lot of groups that aren't acting at all, they're just playing the notes on the page, which have been some of my biggest epiphanies ever. Have been in a concert hall when you're only allowed to clap at certain times and it's just the notes on the page, like a lot of them, more than I could ever count. But yeah, there's definitely a connection there. So that's very interesting that you say that you feel that that's the future of things moving forward. I couldn't agree with you more, and I know that Lance does as well.
In my 4 years with Arnold Jacobs, I can't count how many times he said to me, "We are like actors. Right. We have to be like actors on our instrument." Yep. And I can still hear him say that, and we're like actors. And he had this big tenor voice and this baritone, and he would say, "Oh, we have to be like actors." And he would talk about being on stage. And if you have a role in a Broadway show and your role is to be the happiest guy ever and your dog just died, you have to go in and act the part. You have to do the job. And so I think there's two things. First of all, we have to give them something real from ourselves, but we also have to act the music for what the composer intended and do that job too. And the audience sees that, and they want to see you having fun doing your job. They want to see that. And I think not enough professional ensembles these days show up and have a good time doing their job.
Yeah. How many groups, chamber groups too, how many groups play a concert? And for my soapbox for a moment, I don't like to get on a soapbox too much. It said no one about me ever. Nowadays, like, standing ovation is just, it's required, right? I mean, as long as you just do a pretty good job, everyone stands up, like, no matter what. It really means nothing. But irregardless, as the kids say, the crowd, the crowd's going nuts, and the orchestra or a string quartet or whatever gets done, and then they stand up, and it looks like while they're standing there listening to the applause, the performers look like they're posing for a driver's license photo. I mean, it's just like, it's not even that they're not smiling. It's just like it's the complete absence of any joy of any kind at all. Not just nothing. And then it's, it can be kind of weird to be, and I understand it can feel strange when you're done playing a show to stand up and like to beam, smiling. It takes practice, because if you're in a brass quintet, you kind of have to do that, or in a chamber brass group that's bigger, like WSB. It's a little bit odd when there's no interaction, but yeah, there can be a real disconnect there, and people respond to joy, and you can even have joy in playing sad music. I mean, you can have joy in playing scary music or whatever, or anything. But I think that's just, it's so vitally important for the artist and the audience to have some kind of a connection. And I'm not rooting for anybody to fail, and I think the world needs more music, it needs more art, but I wonder if the groups or the people that don't make that connection with the audience on some level and aren't showing their joy, if those are the ones that end up struggling moving forward. I have a feeling that it is going to be them. So,
I
sorry, go ahead.
just said I agree.
Oh, I love those. This are my two favorite words in the English language. So Phil's nice for a trumpet player. It's kind of annoying, don't you think, Lance? We haven't even asked him about high notes yet. How do you play high notes, Phil?
Yeah, what's the best mouthpiece to get?
It's called there's a new company called the Bent Dime Mouthpiece Corporation.
LLC.
They just take and they take vintage bent dimes and they stick them on a lead pipe and they just stick a hole in there and you just press hard.
I've heard that the 1981 to 1985 dimes in particular are really the ones that you want to.
The D series, yeah.
Yeah, the D series.
The Roosevelts.
Yes, but the late 70s are better for Baroque, right? Yeah.
I prefer the ones that actually don't have a hole in them. I like watching players try and work on
because it's more of a challenge.
That's right.
That's what it's like playing an oboe.
They separate. That's right.
So here's a question that might be impossible to answer. So I'll ask you to put you on the spot. You've done how many This wasn't the question, but how many arrangements have you done in your career? Thousands, right?
Yeah, I can't count that.
Yeah.
I have a whole basement full of file cabinets of stuff, and every time I look at it, I was like, "Oh my God, did I do all that?"
So, if you had to choose one of those arrangements that is either your favorite or the one you're most proud of, or the one that somebody who's never heard of you or what you do, who's a really great musician that you'd want to play for that person, like what's one that comes to mind?
Oh wow.
See, I told you it's going to be hard.
I'll tell you the one that I just recently put on the front of our Washington State Brass website, wsbrass.com, and I try to change out those videos every now and then. I did an arrangement of Salome's Dance to the Seven Veils for brass, and we did a video of that, and every time I listened to it, I was like, first of all, I'm starting with one of the greatest pieces of music ever written. I think that's one of the keys to my success is that I don't just pick crap to arrange. I mean, you can't really go wrong with that.
Right.
Oh, you guess you could, but I mean, I'm starting with a great piece of music.
Right.
And then your job is to not screw it up. And so I'm putting it for brass, and on there is Marty Hackelman and some just fabulous players that just bring it to life, and go watch it. It's a lot of fun.
I'll never forget the first arrangement that I heard of yours. I was also playing. It was down in Mexico with Jens, who we're going to get to very shortly, and Marty and Fred Mills and Jennifer Snow, Jens's wife, or I should say Jens is her husband, so she's more important than he is. And more accomplished. She's a badass. But it was Appalachian Spring for it was like 7 brass and piano and percussion, and it was just, boy, it was incredible. And there were obviously some serious horses in that group, but I remember saying like, wow. And I knew your name from the tuba book, and this was like before. This was right around the time I had moved to town, so we hadn't met each other yet, but I was immediately, you're arranging as all of the great arrangers do. We're talking to Sam Palafian here in just a little bit. J.D. Shaw is another one. Like all the great brass arrangers, you kind of have a signature sound, and that doesn't mean that all of your arrangements sound the same. That's not the case, but there's just kind of I can tell when it's a Snedecor arrangement pretty quickly, and I would have a very hard time describing it or putting it into words. But to me, that's the ultimate compliment for an arranger is when you have a voice that's specific, which you absolutely have. So. Everybody go to the website and check out that arrangement. Can you tell me how, for anybody interested, how did you first get into arranging? Like what was the first piece that you arranged? And I'm assuming that it wasn't very good because I've never heard anyone say that their first arrangement was great. But can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, well, I started arranging for my high school jazz band, and as I was a sophomore, and I started writing a little bit and doing some arrangements of some pop tunes. And then I had a small group called Current, Current. We had a big lightning bolt for our logo, and it was a rhythm section and sax and trumpet. And I just started arranging like Earth, Wind and Fire and Lionel Richie and Chuck Mangione and just junk like that we would play for dances and stuff. And I didn't really know where to go to just buy like stock arrangements of this stuff. I literally would just take it off the record. And so I would sit there, I'll never forget, sitting there with a record or a tape. Actually, what I would do is I would record the record to a cassette tape. This is really dating me now. And then I would take my little cassette tape and play it over and over again and write down all the parts in manuscript and hand it to the guys. And that's how I got my feet wet doing that. And then I realized what worked and what didn't. And some of them didn't really work at all. And some of them did. And then I started writing more for bigger ensembles. And that actually, I did current before I did jazz band. I did current before I started that in junior high. And then I went to the jazz band and I started arranging for them. And then when I get to college, I studied with Rayburn Wright used to be the arranger for Radio City Music Hall. And he was the jazz and contemporary medium professor at the Eastman School. And I learned a ton from him. And I'll forget, he looked at me one time and he goes, never just do something that's already been done the same way. Always have something different to say when you do an arrangement. Don't just regurgitate it. Do something different. Make it in a different sound, or do something like he had this arrangement of I Got Rhythm that he did for the Eastman Brass. And it was so brilliant the way he mixed up the rhythms and the themes, and it was so interesting to listen to. And I was like, wow, how does he think of that? And he sits down and uses his imagination right away. How can I imagine this tune being different than what has come before it? And so in my case, in like something like Salome's Dance of the Seven Veils, I didn't change any of the actual bars. I just tried to make it something a little more, not more, but different in brass. I tried to say something different in brass. So all my transcriptions, because I do a lot of transcribing for Washington Symphonic Brass, not necessarily arrangements. I do arrangements, actually, but I also do this transcribing. And the transcribing has to be a little different in some way. And usually that's just putting some different colors together that make it more exciting. And one of the things that I'm most proud of, actually, now that you mention it, is my arrangements of the Witches' Sabbath from the Symphonie Fantastique. Mm-hmm. And there's all these sections that have these woodwinds going, and then you have the section where the strings are bouncing their bow on the fingerboard and going. Well, I've got our guys taking trumpet mutes and banging them against the bell for that section, and then all the high woodwind things. I completely rewrote those lines to work with brass, and I think it comes off beautifully. Check that out. That's on our CD called, I think it's on Dances with Brass. It's the Witches' Sabbath. I'm sorry, The Edge. The Witches' Sabbath is on The Edge, the one with the Shostakovich and the Appalachian Spring. And that one came out really well, I think. And Marty Hackelman's part in that is spectacular because all the things, all those horn rips are just completely take no prisoners. I always smile when I listen to them.
Are you? What's your take on albums? I mean, are you recording albums anymore? Are you printing CDs? How are you distributing music? How do you see that moving forward?
Well, there's always going to be a market for CDs at concerts, at live events. You always need to have the audience have the opportunity to take a part of you home, and that's always going to be there. I don't think anybody's ever going to lose that. But now, instead of printing up 2,000 or 3,000 CDs, print up 500 for your concerts, or 1,000, and that's not going to sell. That's not going to sell like hotcakes. What's really going to sell are the downloads. Get it on iTunes. Get it on all these the digital things. You're not going to make a lot of money on that. Recording is not going to ever pay you a lot of money. There's the famous incident of our Carmina Burana CD, and we originally put that out on MSR Classics. And the way that contract was structured, by the way, always do this. Never sell your master. Always own your master, because in this case, we were able to somebody from Warner Classics. At the time, Warner Classics was very active in not only just doing reissues, but finding new groups and putting new things out. And so they found us and they said, we want to put this out on Warner Classics. We're going to print up 5,000 of these right away, and you're going to sell at least 25 to 50,000 units of these. And we're going to give you an advance, which is never completely unheard of. Mm-hmm. They gave us, $2,000 or $3,000 in advance, and they took our master. They hired an actor to do the or a model to do the cover of this thing. It's called Briarana in Brass. And those of you Googling it right now, you'll find that it's out of print because shortly thereafter, MSR Classics went out of business. I mean, they're still reissuing, but they're not. I don't know if they're in business now, or not. I think they're still in business, but they're not doing the same thing. It's like they basically, all their development people are gone. They're just taking things from the vault and reissuing. But anyway, ours is basically out of print, but it's still available through WSB.com and WSBrass.com. Anyway, it's a great CD, and we had high hopes for it. And then kind of the market fell out. They realized, hey, people aren't buying CDs. It doesn't matter that Amazon's selling these CDs. People are downloading it from iTunes instead of buying the physical CD. So it's going to be something that's more like advertising. Think of your CDs as advertising. That's it. It's not going to make you a lot of money. You might break even, but it's advertising.
So then how does a young group justify the expense, I guess,
because it's advertising. It's the same as putting an ad on the radio or putting an ad in the paper or anything else. And you're not going to get that money back except in audience. Mm-hmm. You have to have that advertising. That's
a big mental shift for people, especially of our vintage. But yeah,
but it also documents what you do, which is important, I think, too. I mean, 100 years from now, somebody might come across this CD and listen to it and go, oh, that's kind of cool. So there's that, too. Right. But you're not going to make a lot of money on it.
Right.
So you, I'm sure, are aware that our dear friend Jens Lindemann, who you collaborate with regularly up at every summer in Banff and elsewhere, I know you've had him in to play with Washington Symphonic Brass on a number of occasions. I'm sure you're aware that he's been going through a very trying time with these chop problems that he's going through. And in fact, the three of us all sat at the same table at Kevin Gibo's wedding not too long ago, which Phil arranged the music for, which was rather nice. So can you maybe offer up some words of encouragement for your colleague and good friend Jens Lindemann?
Jens, I'm thinking about you, and I just want to say that I just don't think you use enough pressure. If you were to use more pressure, and I think you should work out a little more, and do the curls. And then if you can't get enough pressure going, just try to use the side of the table or something and just really get it going. Press as hard as you can. I think it'll happen for everybody. And if it's hurting your face, just slam a few of those Canadian beers and go for it.
Use the side of a table. You mean like put the trumpet up to his face and then like put the bell on the side of the table and then just lean in?
There you go. That's my advice.
I dig it.
That's some of the best advice we've gotten for him yet. And it's specifically. He specifically needs to be pounding himself in the face with Canadian beer. So Molson is
doesn't
good.
Work with American.
So Natty Light ain't gonna work, but Molson is like that's money. And so what happens if you pound your face with American beer?
Well, it might hurt because American beer doesn't have enough alcohol in it.
Oh, I see. It's the conversion, right?
Yeah, the conversion.
Well, that was a good answer, Phil. I like it. Use the side of a table. I did not see that coming. Did you, Lance?
No.
Do we have any other questions to ask this fine young man here before he goes into Sibelius?
I have a story, which is I don't know if you'll remember this, Phil, but I think the only time I played a gig with you was in 1998, and it was on August 2nd. And why do I remember that, you might ask?
I have no idea why you remember that.
Because that was the day that I became a veteran. I was in the United States Air Force Band for 7 years, 2 months, and 14 days, and I out-processed it like, I don't know, I had to go do something at like 9 a.m. or something.
Oh, we were playing some weird naval ceremony thingamajig, right?
That or something, yeah. And I just had this smile on my face. Yeah, I just remember you looking at me like, "What? Why are you just?"
Phil was like, "This guy really likes my arrangements."
Really happy, yeah.
I've got a fan.
Was his gig. I was a guest on his group. You guys were doing NBV, right?
You might be right. Actually, that's exactly right. It was a quartet thing. Yeah. Oh man, I was just the happiest boy there was that day.
I think there was some Weissenbier involved that night.
There may have been. You never know.
You never know. I was at NRO that summer, so I'm positive that there was beer that night for me because it was one of the nights of that 8 weeks. 8-week period. So there was beer involved for me. I was celebrating for you, Lance, even though we wouldn't meet for another 4 years.
NBV. So, we should have an NBV talk sometime.
What is NBV?
NBV. We had this brass quartet going for a while. We made a CD. It was called Nothing But Valves because the trumpet player, Bill Adcock, hates trombone players. And so it was there were 2 incarnations. My favorite incarnation was 2 trumpets, horn, and youth. And then we had some personnel shift, and we did 2 trumpets, youth, and tuba, which I didn't think worked as well. Some of the guys liked it better, but I liked the first version. But there's all this. I mean, there's buckets of quartets that nobody plays or knows about, and the bread divides by 4 way better than 5.
That is better.
So yeah, I had a great time playing quartet.
It was a good group.
We had a lot of fun.
There you go. Who knew?
Yeah. So who knew?
Phil was there for the 3rd happiest moment of your life, other than the birth of your 2 children.
That's way up there. I don't know
and your divorce. So fourth happiest moment of your life.
Definitely in the top 10.
Sorry, too soon?
No,
okay.
Me.
All right, good. So, all right, I wanted to make it awkward at the buzzer, so I did that. So,
quiet Phil got.
Yeah, Phil got quiet. Yeah, that's just kind of like,
I'm just letting you guys relive your memories. Yeah. That's all.
Hey, man, we're letting Lance relive them while he still has them. So, it's one of those things.
Who are you?
Yeah, that's why we do this podcast. We don't really even care about asking questions to the guests. We're just trying to document our memories. So it's similar to making a recording these days. So, and somehow that's going to lead to networking and profit. We just have to figure that the whole 8 hours a day thing reeks of effort. So I'm going to try and find a shortcut there. But so
good luck with that.
Yeah.
Remember there's a 3 martini lunch involved in there too.
Oh, I see. 8 hours a day, 3 martini lunch, and there you go. So it's actually
one martini is too many. 2 martini. Oh wait, no. 1 martini is not enough. 2 martinis is too many, and 3 martinis is not enough.
No.
Stole that.
Oh goodness. So you can find Phil at philsnedecor.com. You can find his group Washington Symphonic Brass at wsbrass.com. You can find him at the Hart School of Music website. And where else? I don't know if anybody wants to find you in a 4th place. You're on Twitter, I know.
I'm on Twitter, but I also have a website from my publishing company called pasmusic.com.
Great.
And there you can look at all the etude books and all the. I actually licensed this score flipper software from the Art of Sound Music, and you can actually click on my arrangements. It will start flipping the score for you and playing the recording. You can listen to the whole thing, and then you can click a button and buy the PDF.
Huh. Oh, that's pretty cool. And if there are any tuba players that are listening who do not own Phil's etude book, I'm serious. Go get it. It's one of the best ones that we have. Like it's absolutely on my absolute required list for any student that I ever teach. It's really great, and there are. It's really hard in spots, but it's like great music and hard. It's not hard and dumb. So it's I can't recommend it any more highly. So go check that out. And Lance, am I forgetting anything?
No, all those links that we mentioned will be in the show notes.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much for spending part of your morning before you go Albany Symphony this evening, and we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And that does it for another episode of The Brass Junkies. You've been listening to The Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to help support the podcast in order to make more episodes like this one possible, please visit pedalnotemedia.com/donate for more details. Also, be sure to check out our latest recording, The Brass Recording Project, at brassrecordingproject.com. The Brass Junkies is produced by Austin Boyer and Buddy Deschler of the Fredericksburg Brass Institute. Executive producers are Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.